this in a few weeks. If you would, I want you to do. I want you to, with a point in mind. I want you to turn and speak to a neighbor. But in process of doing that, I want you and a neighbor, someone close to you, to make a commitment. Someone's name. Speak that name to your neighbor, who you're going to invite to come back next week. Think of someone you can invite to come next week and share that with your neighbor.
Who am I going to invite? I got so many. There's so many.
Just pick somebody.
I feel like those little two peasants in Braveheart, and they're standing up there on the battlefield and they're ready to go home, and they say, "There's so many." There's so many.
They're all so
There's
many.
so many.
They're all.
Yeah. Sit down there, Jim.
I'm going to assume by now we have enough names that we can fill the room up next week. We've got too many empty chairs, so we need to fill the room next week. We've got a special guest with us this morning that Phil's going to introduce a little later. But if you would, let me open this with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I stand before you this morning humbly with my brothers, confessing sins, Lord, that keep me held back, keep me from the blessings that you offer, bountiful fruit that you have for me, Lord. I would pray that you would be with each of us this morning. Open our hearts, Lord, to receive the message that's going to be brought. This is such an important thing, God, for us as men, some of us as husbands and fathers. The knowledge to be imparted of intimacy and the sexual relationship is something that most of us just do not understand. And just genuinely pray that our hearts would be opened to receive this message this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Be on the alert. Stand firm in your faith. Act like men. Be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13. I start out this morning with the verse that we normally start out with because we have a guest speaker this morning. Ron's going to introduce Jim. But, I am humbled consistently by thinking about what God's done in our men's movement last several years. I mean, many of you have come for years and you understand the bigger picture of what we're doing and the number of men that have been touched through the years and the men's movement that we're a part of. Some of you are just kind of stepping into the room and beginning to get a feel for that. And about 8-9 years ago, God brought such a great team member to what we've been doing in Jackson for years and bringing Ron Hunter back to Mississippi. And most of you know Ron. But what is happening very quickly is Jackson here is becoming a destination. It's becoming a destination location for men who are working in sexual brokenness. For years, as I've worked with men, and we sent guys up to Minnesota to work with Mark Laser and his ministry of True Intimacy, and then we started sending guys and gals to Bethesda in Nashville for their sexual brokenness intensives there at Bethesda. And now Ron and Eva Hunter have gone through their training. They're equipped. They have their own offerings in terms of couples intensive, men's intensive. Ron's, of course, part of everything that we do with Deer Camp and our men's coaching weekend and all that. And this weekend, Ron and Eva are hosting a couples intensive and Jim has come to be with them. But I love my brother Ron. So much of what we do requires good team members. We have a great team, and Ron is captain of the team, the way I look at it. So please welcome my friend Ron, and Ron's going to introduce our speaker this morning.
Thank you, Phil. We've been trying to find a good speaker for Thursday mornings. We think we finally, you guys let us know how Jim does, and then we'll see if we can get him maybe to move from Charlotte. Thank you, Phil. Sometimes in life you meet people and there's this instant connection. I always talk about that when I met Phil, and I just believe it's when spirit meets spirit, like-minded people, and certainly Holy Spirit involved in that. I would introduce Jim as one of those people in my life. Jim is I could read his resume. Jim's got a resume, and certainly Jim has been at the forefront of just this work in the area of sexual brokenness. One of the leading voices in the church. The church is failing in this area, guys. All you got to do is look around. There's a part of me that wants to say you guys are doing a great job because it's good for my business. But it is sad in the sense that we're just failing as a body of Christ in the area of sexual brokenness. And Jim Cress is one of the leading voices in educating and helping the church really begin to understand this complicated, complex area of life that trips so many of us up. Jim has done a little bit of everything. He was the radio host for the June Hunt radio program for years, developed the call-in program for her show. Many of you may know June Hunt. I used to listen to her. I used to try to call in, but y'all would never take my calls. Yeah. So I was trying to get help, couldn't get it. And then Jim worked with the Minrith Meyer radio program. As his buddy Eli always says, Jim has a face made for radio. Jim is an ordained pastor. He is a licensed professional counselor. He's the founder and president of Integrity Redeemed Workshops. Jim has worked at Bethesda, as Phil mentioned, On Site, which is another place that we refer lots of people to. Jim's president owner of Integrity Redeemed Workshops. Jim has been married to his wife Jessica for 32 years. Integrity Redeemed Workshops. The thing I love the most about Jim is that Jim is a man of integrity. And I don't say that. Many times we hear that word and it's like he's the Bible answer man. No, he's a man of integrity because he's integrated. Jim knows his good parts and he knows his bad parts. And those two are integrated together. Wholeness. And Jim is not afraid to share the bad parts of his life. And I believe certainly that was one of the things that drew me to Jim first time we ever met, because I just believe that is our testimony, that is our story, and it is how we share the gospel. Jim walks in the light and lives a life of integrity. And I love my brother and so excited about spending 3 days with you and I guess kind of with Eli. But anyway, Eli's kind of
grumpy. He'll be in the other group.
Yeah.
Love you, buddy.
Love you, dude.
Thank you. What is, Phil, I trust you. I don't know if I trust Ron with this. What is the time we go off the air? 7:45. So we're all in this thing together.
wave at me 7:40ish or whatever. I'll get you merrily on your way on this beautiful morning. Thank you for letting me be here. The playing field's level, no matter what you're struggling with today. For a day we could get back to Genesis 2. There was a man and a woman, and they were both naked and unashamed. And the curtain falls at the end of Genesis chapter 2, and it comes up on Act 3, and they realize the crap, it hit the fan, and they were suddenly naked and ashamed. And we've been that way ever since. And if it had been you or I standing there, our faces and hands would have been covered with fruit. We would have, let's just get honest about that. And so we would have, because we still do this, we would have grabbed whatever fig leaves we could find, if you know that story, and we would have tried to cover our inadequacies. Like one of the number one fears that we fellows have is the fear that we're inadequacy. They even have a word called impotent, not powerful. God left in the very anatomy of a man the design that we don't like certain parts of our body not to work. Maybe that's why many of us have tested it so many times. Let's get honest about that. Who knows? So we fear, we fear inadequacy. So I don't think for those of us who have a relationship with the Lord, I don't think till heaven we'll ever get back to being naked and unashamed again. But there are ways, there's a path that I'm going to keep walking, and many of you are walking it, that I'm going to do the best I can. That's what this weird thing called counseling does, or coming to a place like this, and we try to get honest. You never want to, I don't ever want to go to a group and say, I don't know anybody, so let's just rip off all the fig leaves and let me get naked right away. I call that a relational exhibitionist. It's like, a small group or something. Someone says, by God, I'm going to get it honest right now. And you're like, TMI, Intimacy should go very slow. If you see that word, most of us guys think of intimacy, we think sex. Think of that as into-me-see, intimacy. So with your spouse, partner, whoever, if you're dating someone, even a buddy, if you go to deer camp or you're just having coffee somewhere, slowly to get to know each other's story, slowly, not that you kind of disrobe real fast. So that's part we're going to talk about today. I'm going to contrast two people you know pretty well, David and Solomon. I like to do this now. This is a little bit of a polygraph I'm going to put out, because I might call on you to tell the end of it. How many of you know for sure, no shame around this, how King Solomon died? I'll give you a hint. It's found in 1 Kings 9, 10, 11. If you don't know, it's okay. Don't know, no shame. Most of us don't know that. I didn't know it for years, and I went to seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary. And it's like, I stumbled upon it. I went, are you serious? And once I found out how he died, I struggled with reading Proverbs. So good men, good friends, where we can be like iron sharpening iron, really important. One little story about Roan that's precious to me. He was visiting me in North Carolina once, and we were going to go hunting. A guy I know pretty well said you could come out, and we were going to go deer hunting on his land. And so I thought, this guy's a prankster, so I'm going to get Roan. I walked up and so talked to the guy. He said, yeah. He said, this is what you need to do. You go over here and all that. And he said, I do have a favor for you. He said, it's a mule of all things. He said, I've got an old mule out here. And he said, I can't face doing this. I need you to put the mule down for me. So I'm like, okay, all right. So as I'm coming off, I'm thinking, this is my chance to get Roan's goat. I mean, I'm going to get him good. I'm going to get him. So I start talking real loud. The guy closes the door. I wink, and I start stomping off the porch. That sucker. Roan goes, whoa, man, what in the world's going on here? I said, I bring a friend out, and he said he'd let us hunt. Now he said, we're not hunting them. I didn't mean you guys said you come out and look at the deer. You can't shoot them or say. So I make up this big story. So I get my gun, go over, and the mule's standing there, and I shoot and kill the mule, and the mule drops. And Roan may have told this story. I don't know, but next thing I know, I hear the car door behind me open, or the truck door open, and he jumps out. And all of a sudden, I hear boom, boom. I said, what the heck did you do? He said, let's get the hell out of here. I just shot 2 of his cows. So be careful with Roan. So a little bit of my story. I grew up in, I don't know if these are around the Jackson, Mississippi area, But I grew up in what was called Independent Fundamental Baptist. And I don't say anything negative about them. Our faith, though, for us was built a lot on what you couldn't do. You don't do this, and you don't do this, and you don't do that, unless you go behind the scenes and you do all kinds of stuff. So within that strong conservative church family, when I was about 4 years old, a group of older boys, and I believed them, and now I know it was my introduction into the tribe. A group of older boys said, standing around me out in public, you need to do this, and involved me as a 4-year-old. I have the memory, performing a certain type of a sexual act on an older boy with everybody else standing around. He promised, he said, you'll like this, it will be, and he said a certain line that I carry with me to this day. So I did that. Interesting things. The last thing I remember, my dad was chief of police in our little town. Is the scene ends with my dad across the street yelling, "Boys, what are you doing over there?" And then it goes blank. But the memory is real. So there's an introduction to sexuality of, so this is what it's about. And I believe the older tribe, the elder statesmen of the tribe, when they said, this is what you ought to do. So that's called sexual abuse, and that's kind of my first awakening into that. I'll fast forward. In my home was not a lot of love and touch. I was fifth of 6 kids. Mom said, your sisters are your real mom, meaning she wanted them to raise me. The only involvement I had with my dad at all, being that he was out of gas by the 5th kid, was, and some of you can remember the sound of this thing called a belt coming off and hitting every loop when it goes around, boom, 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 and then he'd whip me with the belt. I tell my story, I call this naming, not blaming. The point is not to say, let's parent bash. That's what you do in counseling, all right? No, we're just telling the story, kind of like God did with the Old Testament. See, God put crappy stuff in there. You know, a man in the Old Testament cut up his sex slave, his concubine, into 12. I'm sorry, you're choking on that biscuit when I'm telling this story. I see that. It's a crappy story to tell at breakfast. But he cut his sex slave up into 12 pieces and mailed them to the 12 tribes of Israel. So maybe you haven't had your devotions like in Leviticus lately or something like that. But those stories are in there. God can handle. He's a very earthy God. He's like, we can sit and talk. We can be honest. So in my story, we'll fast forward about age 12, an older boy in the back of a van said, do you know what? And he used terms some of you may have heard. They're slang terms for masturbation. And I knew those terms, and I said, well, if you do that, and I'm dead serious, all I had heard from older boys in the tribe was if you masturbated, you'd either get real bad acne or go blind. I mean, those were legends that were told. I thought that's weird. So he showed me on himself how to masturbate. That's weird. And I thought, no way. And offered, he said, would I do that to him? No, that's even weirder. So he said, well, then at least do this. Another older boy, notice how another older boy is leading me into sexuality. He said, why don't you do this? I want you to go home and try this. And basically told me how to masturbate. So I went home and, you know, I was that boy like many of us guys who had not really found his penis yet. You know, that day when you found it and went, holy smokes, this is really, wow. Okay. So I did that and I thought it was nice. And he brought me back and said, we were back somewhere hanging around him, older boy, saying, well, how'd that work? And I said, kind of felt kind of good, but not much more past that. And he said, no, you got to keep going until you know what happens. It's like, well, he was right about the first one. So I did. Sure enough, that happens. I went, holy cow. You know, it's like, now I know this really, really works. He was right again. Sometime later, he says, now you need to add something to it. Now listen to the overt coaching that's going on. You need to add something to it. He said, you need to do these things called Playboy. Well, I was a paper boy, and I knew that every now and then you'd find the Holy Grail. Some old fart would throw out a stack of Playboys or something. Playboy is a magazine that existed before Al Gore invented the internet. I don't know if you know that. So I said, well, conservative Baptist home. So and he said, well, your mom will have, I guarantee you, Sears catalogs. Does anybody remember that? You used to get like 4 or 5, the Christmas one, Montgomery Ward, Sears, and all like that. So that was what I dubbed poor man's pornography. You know, because really whatever you're looking at, we have a fancy word called an arousal template. What you like to look at, if you happen to look at that junk, as I did for years, that pornography and in my story, a Victoria's Secret that rival any Playboy I've ever seen. That's what I chose that I really enjoyed looking at. So I said, yeah, she has the catalog. He was right. Before I look at that, now I've bonded. And what became the thing I looked at the most clear up through a seminary degree and radio career and struggle was lingerie. That was the big thing. I later learned a fancy pants story that was honest because I so craved the femininity with abandonment by my father, really my mom just being a crass, Pall Mall, chain smoking, bingo playing woman. There was no tenderness there. So then I began masturbating, looking at the Sears catalogs, the poor man's pornography, and it worked. So here I am coached up into that. And then we did a thing, maybe you have in your faith, it was called rededicating your life. And I thought I could rededicate my life and tried many times, but it just never worked. So I kept struggling. So I was looking for an external solution to an internal problem. So I grow up struggling, hiding the ways I would try to sneak a big fat Sears catalog in my pants leg and go walking, I remember like going to the bathroom like this. Yeah, and that bathroom became a chamber where I could escape to many, many worlds. Again, way before I needed anything with the internet. Later, it morphed into a sister much older than me, and she had Hell's Box Office, HBO. We didn't have it. We had 3 channels, at our house, but she was successful. And Show Me a Good Time, Skinamax, all those channels. Man, I thought, what the heck? And that's that progression that can happen. She'd say, "You have a TV in your room? Come stay with me." And so now I've got softcore, real pornography in there. So I thought if I went to a Christian college, Chattanooga, Tennessee, which I did, that would cure it. It didn't. I couldn't find anything pornographic there, but I learned I could get a picture of some movie star in Time magazine. They had it would only be the headshot, and I would do what I call pornographize that. Work with a lot of guys. Roan knows this too, and they'll say, "I don't look at porn." I'm going, really? Anything you look at that sexually, you're looking at Maxim, you're looking at CBSSportsline.com, and there's a little girl there. The nucleus accumbens, fancy term for this pleasure center of your brain, when you're looking at it, it lights up. So a freebie for you today is to kind of say to yourself in rigorous honesty and integrity to say, anything that I'm willfully clicking on, going to look on for my own sexual gratification, because you're probably, if you're married, not saying, "Hey, honey, by the way, I got a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, some lunch meat. You told me to get that. And I sat through People magazine for an hour just looking at hot women." You're probably not going to tell her all the way. So it's secretive. So any of that you can take with you today, that's a pornographization of those pictures. So it's like pornography. So I found the Holy Grail, which was if I could just marry a woman, and I believe this, I would have live Playboy channel because she'd be live. And it worked. What I now know as sex addiction ended, which is are any guys single here today? Even if you're divorced, whatever, I couldn't believe it. I thought, why didn't somebody tell me this? Because when I got married, all my sexual struggles went away. Till about 3 months later, I can still remember, and only one of you remember this show called The Benny Hill Show. And he'd have those girls going in bikinis. And she said the 2-letter word to the 3-letter word. She said, "No sex." And it was back. That beach ball just came up flying. So now I'm back in this. So through Bible college, through careers in Christian radio, and I really wasn't trying to live like a fraud. I just could not shake this problem. And then to go to Dallas Seminary, get ordained, and thinking that would do it. My world changed when a dear friend and mentor, I don't even know if you guys know this, but his name is Larry Crabb, and he just moved to Charlotte, which is funny because I left where he lived a number of years ago. And Larry looked at me and said, he was going through his own transformation of looking at not just our sin, but the new covenant. What's deepest in us, below all that? And he said, "So I know part of you wants to masturbate. Is there anything deeper in you?" I'd never even thought that. I said, "Yeah, there is." He said, "Why?" I said, "Part of me doesn't want to masturbate. Tell me about that part." I see my wife, my 2 little boys at the time through the drywall in there in their bedroom. I'm going, on my best day, because I'd wake up every morning going, "I wish I wouldn't have done it." Matter of fact, I wrote, it's in my daytimer to this day, a statement that I wrote one morning. I said to myself, "You will never regret not acting out." I never got up I didn't. Some of you might, seriously. But I never got up, I just, dang it, wish I would have masturbated a, squiggly line cable where you could see, hope the blue scene would come in, the whole scene would come in. One or two of you know what I'm talking about, And I said, you'll never regret not acting out. That was my truth. And I thought, the man of integrity that beats within my heart, who I want to be, I don't want to do that. And I entered into a period of sobriety. You have to grieve the loss of addiction. You know what? We can beat ourselves up, or we can say, some people have thoughts like you're a pervert, or man, of what if people knew, and all those thoughts. You know what? That masturbating to porn, or just what I call snacking. I don't do that. I just kind of look at some. It's snacking. It's still hitting that part of your brain. You know what it did? It was a way to try to comfort us. I'm not excusing sin. It was a way to say, that feels good. I'm safe. I'm okay. We guys can have pain. We can be afraid. We can feel like I couldn't get the girl, or see with porn now, as we'll see with David and Solomon quickly. If the average guy who is struggling with pornography is a modern day polygamist by default, because you can't take a computer mouse or an iPhone and swipe to bed with your wife. Bigger breast, different hair color, different ethnicity, make her a petite brunette, make her a big breasted. You can't do that. So the average guy I know won't click on one picture of a woman and that's it. So he's swiping and moving, and may encounter in one setting 100 women easily. Do you hear the polygamy part of that? Functionally, you get to have what Solomon had. You get to experience a lot of women. The problem is, it's a dark cul-de-sac of what it takes you down, because the brain research is clear. You can't be in that. Even if guys who've had their prostate removed saying, I can't even get an erection, they say you ought to feel the battle of lust now. It's all burning inside. Sex happens between these two ears, not down there. You can't turn that off and then just go be intimate with your wife. If you want a challenge in this one, you probably throw me out of the room on, but if you don't believe that, then go in rigorous honesty and say, honey, before we make love, and it's intimacy, and the two shall become one flesh, it's so sacred. I want to tell you that not thoughts I've had in my mind, but I've willfully looked at probably 20 minutes of sexual pictures this week. And the average person's not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. So part of that is just remember, I'm a grateful recovering sex addict. We have more help than you have problems. The workshops that Roan's doing, even we're doing with these couples this weekend, what I'm doing with Integrity Redeemed, it's basically rewriting the stories of men's lives. That's what we do. So we have more help than you have problems to come in and just take some time out of your life, whether you do that here with Roan or come down to Charlotte if you want to, and be able to say, it'll take some time. It's your life. It's your legacy after all. One of my websites, I own a bunch of them. There's nothing on this one. There will be, but it's visionandlegacy.com. If I do anything with men don't need counseling. By the way, we cheat and call it counseling because we got to make a living. Men need mentoring. That's what men need. Yeah. It's paid mentoring. It's all it is. It's different than for women. So what we're doing is walking with a group of fellows and helping them to be able to walk back through their story. God put the story in the Old Testament enough, so why can't we? Check that out. And you're worth it too. You know it? Your ROI on this kind of work is tremendous. Your legacy. No man wants to be done. There's not a man here would like to say, well, whatever age I am, let me just be looking at sexual pictures or masturbating to them. And then, okay, give me a heart attack and I die, and people come in and find me slumped over in that with my pants down, metaphorically or literally. Nobody wants to die like that. So what's your legacy? That's being built now. And today for all of us can be the first day of the rest of your life. Phil, the great timekeeper you are. Where's our time? All right. So here's what I want to do is contrast David and Solomon. I'm going to take you, you can look this up or trust me that it's there, but I do have a real Bible up here. Jeremiah 2:17 is a life-changing verse for the Bible, for us in the Bible. It says this, it's the number one verse I can find really about the word we use called sin or any unhealthy acting out. It says this, God says, my people have committed two sins. Well, what are they? One, they've forsaken me, the fountain of living water. The second one is they get a shovel and dig a cistern in the ground, a broken cistern that can hold no water. How many of you ever seen a cistern? Do you ever have one like I did in our backyard? When you go to on-site next week for your training, I just outed you. There's a big cistern right by the chow hall. So all the water would run into that. And God says, the problem is the cistern, you're trying to collect all this water and you're acting out. Oh, it goes bigger than that in your work. And if I could just achieve this level of success, then I would be, if I could just, then I'd be happy. So God says, everybody, so it's an even playing field, two sins. You first have to say, God, you're not enough. I've wrestled guys who say, no, I don't say, I believe in God. And God himself said, when we act out or sin, we're saying you're not enough. You know Oswald Chambers, my utmost for his highest, one or two, you ever heard of him? Great devote. He said, sin is the suspicion that God is not good. So it's relational. So God says you've committed two sins. One, you say, God, you're not enough. By the way, I'm not thinking you're saying that with the front part of your brain. You're not enough. But in your soul, or what we talk in brain research, the limbic part of the brain where pain from our past is, we're saying you're not enough. And then you get a shovel and you start digging out a cistern in the ground that can hold no water. Okay. Later, Jeremiah in the passage was put into a broken cistern up to his armpit. When you're bored, get on YouTube appropriately if you haven't seen it and watch the Rambo scene when he's over there on like a cross and they dip him down in that pig slop. You might remember that one scene, Rambo. You know that, Rambo, theologian. So that's your broken, nasty, but it's familiar. God, by the way, doesn't stand for God on demand. And you can sit there and say, let me tell you what, the lady at the Chick-fil-A drive-through happened to be slow, as happened here in the Great Jackson, Mississippi yesterday. I was 20 minutes in freaking Chick-fil-A. I thought, what are you doing? And my son is in management for Chick-fil-A. So we're tight in the Chick-fil-A family. I thought, wow, there was like 20 minutes just in a drive-through late in the afternoon. That was slow, but I can look at God and say, but at least she was a lot faster than you were, God. Because I want to be satisfied. Now, you know what porn, lust, masturbation does? It says, I will be satisfied now. God doesn't stand for God on demand. It's the porn problem we have. It's accessible. It's anonymous. It's affordable. It's accelerated. It's airbrushed. That woman doesn't really exist in the world. She has a period. She has PMS. She might have some mental problems. She might not. Probably was sexually abused. And you're adding to that. These are real people. Let me take you to 1 Kings 9. Did Solomon dig a broken cistern? Did he try to make life work apart from God? We'll do this and just you get to decide what you want your legacy to be. I'm going to read selected verses real quick. As soon as Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the king's house and all that Solomon desired to build, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time as he appeared to him at Gibeon. And the Lord said to him, I've heard your prayer and your plea, which you've made before me. I've consecrated this house you've built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. And as for you, if you will walk with me in your integrity of heart and uprightness, doing all that I've commanded you, and you keep my statutes and my rules, then here's your legacy. I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, just as I promised David, your father, saying you'll never lack a man on the throne. Never. Never do that. He says, but if you happen to do the opposite of that, you turn aside from following me, it's possible. Remember, he was listed. The Queen of Sheba came to him, the wisest man who ever lived. He said, however, if you go a different path, because he's asking Solomon to really go the road less traveled. If you go the road more, the broad way, the road more traveled, he said, here's a different outcome of legacy. I'll cut off Israel from the land that I've given them and the house that I've consecrated for my name. I'll cast out of my sight. Israel will become just a freaking proverb and a byword among peoples. In this house, see your house here, Solomon? It'll become a heap of ruins. You know what people will do? Everyone who passes by it will be astonished. They'll hiss and they'll say, why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? They'll say, because they, led by Solomon, this is what they'll say. They'll say, I'll tell you why it happened, because they abandoned the Lord, their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and so on and so forth. So Solomon's there, and God says, I put a warning up. In 1 Kings 9:23, real quickly, thus Solomon, the king, excelled all the kings. If the wisest man who ever lived can do this, this helped liberate me. It's all downhill from there. It's all so we've got the wisest man and what he could do. With God talking like out loud. I mean, the loud voice, God, you could hear him. The whole earth actually sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom. Most of us, that's not where we are. So he's at the apex. He's the wisest man who ever lived. Listen to chapter 11. If you don't need any commentary, just listen to how it starts and pay attention to your gut, what goes on when you hear this. Wisest man who ever lived, king of the world, chapter 1. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women. See, that's where these women are that we're looking at in pornography. They're foreign women, and we will ultimately serve their foreign god, who is, the god, little god god of this world, Satan. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, the Chigarites, all the other ones, as they like to say. Of course, God says, and he told all the people of Israel, you shall not enter into marriage with these foreign women, neither they with you, for surely these women will, and this is not bashing women at all. God's just telling it like it is, Solomon. It's not just, well, I looked at some porn, or I kind of looked at some things, I snacked. He says, no, they will, just like the women in pornography or sexy pictures will do, whatever you're doing. And the DVR up here, a lot of guys have stopped looking at porn because they got so much on the DVR, they just look at that. They surely will turn your heart away after their God. Solomon already had a truckload of wives. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. I mean, how much sex can you have? Might he been a sex addict? I don't know. When Solomon was when Solomon was old, his wives indeed turned away his heart. There's his legacy. He gets older, turned him after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God. Here's the comparison, as was the heart of his father David. When you're bored, if you mark this passage down, do a Google search on these gods, little g. Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he did not wholly follow the Lord. Second time you hear this, as his father David did, compared to the old man. Then Solomon built a high place. Read about that later, what a high place is. We even talk about that in sex addiction work. What are your high places? What are the avenues that you know that are open, portals that you can go down, paths you shouldn't go down? Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and Moloch. Really go read about Moloch when you're bored. The abomination of the Ammonites. And so he did for all, equal opportunity, all his foreign wives who made offerings and sacrifice to their gods. So it's not just, well, I looked at it, it's not one-dimensional. Our problem with lust is a multifaceted problem that really requires a multifaceted solution. See, and when you're looking at that junk, you're trying to medicate. What are you trying to medicate? You think you might be bonding even through pornographic pictures. Well, before modern psychology knew about bonding, we had the Bible tell us you have sex with your wife, you become one flesh. Have sex with a prostitute, Paul said, and anybody remember? You become one flesh. You become one with a prostitute. So many of us, one of the dangers of this pornographic struggle is we're bonding and becoming one, attached, literally bonded, maybe demonically. That might be too strong for you on a Thursday morning, but maybe, who knows what, maybe some stronghold. It's not just, well, I kind of looked at it, And we go to our accountability groups. Did you do it this week? Did you struggle? It's all vague. Stop being vague. Get specific. Did you masturbate? If you did, we're not the police, but the vagueness kills. You know why? It's carbon monoxide. Colorless, odorless, tasteless gas. Find one buddy and say, ask me these 5 questions this week. Did you go down the path? Is there anything you're hiding from your wife? Just go down the path. So Solomon then, there's his legacy, 1,000 foreign women, and he sacrifices to their foreign gods. But he abandoned the counsel that the old men gave them and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before them. And we see then what happens, and this is scary to me. God comes and says, Solomon, here's what I'm going to do. You can read it. 1 Kings 9, 10, 11. He said, he keeps comparing him to his father David, and he says this, Solomon, basically, you're not going to die like your father David did. Because the passage to contrast David is Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God. That's why a lot of people don't confess. Because they're saying, oh, I'm screwed up. Confession. Google that word in Greek. It's homo. That means same, legeo, to say. Confession means to say the same thing. If you go vertical to God, God, I'm saying this is what this is. Jesus said that lusting, giving yourself over to lust, is adultery in your heart. So to God, a lot of guys never confess. And they don't with their wife either. Kind of, sort of, maybe. And it's hard to say, if I've been looking at pornography and acting out to it, then I've committed adultery against my wife. I will never say that. That's why things often don't get better. I didn't say you crossed a physical line as such. So Solomon, God says, you're not having a Psalm 51. Be merciful. Have mercy on me, O God. And he says, against you and you only have I sinned. He gets it right vertically. Nathan comes and says, God will forgive you and all that, but the sword will never depart your house. But David ended. We usually think of the sweet psalmist of Israel. We usually think of David and Goliath and those great stories. Solomon, you know what it says later here? He compares him to his father David. Then he says, you're going to look at your sons. He said, because I'm going to rip hell out of the kingdom with your sons after you die. So you're going to die knowing you're not going to die like your daddy did, and your sons are going to pay for it. Read about Solomon's sons later. And this classic line, and Solomon died and was buried with his fathers. Dead air. So inside, I'm encouraging you to look at David and Solomon and ask, are you sacrificing to the foreign gods of these women? A great word here, by the way, is the Greek word for lust is epithumia. Why is that important? It has the word thum, put an R and it sounds thermos. Epithumia is an empty cup. It's a crucible. Temptation that you may face this week feels the emptiness of the cup. Lust tries to fill the emptiness of the cup. And the emptiness of your soul and your cup is not your enemy. Your enemy is your demand to fill that emptiness apart from God. Welcome the intimacy of a relationship with God in the messy places of your life if you want to. It's scary. Talk to this week, just find one person you may say, I want to tell part of my story. Maybe it's just, you may say it this way, one secret you have. We stay as sick as our secrets. So think about what your vision is, the kind of man you want to be. Here's the fact. Every man in here is a man of integrity. You are, because that's who God made you. So just live like it. That's your true identity. You don't have to go be it. God made you a man of integrity. Think of that word as wholeness. By the way, remember John Wayne and Glenn Campbell and true grit? The word integrity, I like that, is it has the word grit in it. May you walk in your integrity this week. The verse I have, would you mind putting up that slide if you want to find? I've got some cards up here too. This is not a commercial. I want you to know that Psalm 26:11 is the verse that God gave me about a year ago. And I'm sitting downstairs and late at night, and I went, oh my gosh, I had to go wake my wife up. Psalm 26:11. But as for me, I shall walk in my integrity. I like it. It's not, I shall stand. I need to move. But as for me, I shall walk in my integrity. Redeem me. So it says right there, integrity, redeem, right? But as for me, I shall walk in my integrity. Redeem me and be gracious to me. So as you're walking through life, am I in wholeness now? Practical tools like bouncing your eyes. But I'm telling you, the biggest thing that will help you is don't walk alone. Share your real story. Okay, not an edited version. Try to take one fig leaf off this week. Remember David and Solomon. Remember Psalm 51 and say, my legacy will be, I will be, because it's who you are, a man after God's own heart. Thought, question, we're done. I don't know. I'll step aside, but thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you being here, and our prayers are with you and Ron and the team. You lead this couples intensive. Just hang on, Jeff. So much of what Jim is talking about, inviting us into, is